What's up, you sweaty nerds and greasy degenerates? Jingliu arrives in Honkai Star Rail tomorrow, so better late than never to put out a build guide for our Frost Queen Jingliu, so let's go ahead and dive straight in. I put out a video yesterday going over Jingliu's light cone options, so if you're interested in that, check the pinned comment below or the description. However, I will go over light cones again briefly in this video towards the end, so if you want, you could also skip ahead for that. But it's time to talk about her relics. Alright, so relic options for Jingliu. Ignore the stats you see in a lot of stuff because these are just placeholders, so I can explain some stuff to you guys. There are 3 main 4-piece sets that I want to go over with y'alls, and 2 main planar sets that I want to go over with you guys. And we will be going over main stats and subsets and all that good stuff. Check timestamps if you want to skip ahead. So there's the 4-piece ice set, which the reason why this is so good on her is not just because, oh, her ice set on the ice character, her. It's actually this 4-piece bonus that she gets from it. After the wearer uses their ultimate, their crit damage increases by 25% for 2 turns. So if you use this ultimate right before she enters her enhanced state, or even during it, she will get this incredibly fat crit damage bonus, and she'll be very, very bursty while she's in her enhanced state. This is something you want to time out and be aware of if you are using her. Then of course there's the 2-piece ice set and the 2-piece musketeer set, giving her a 10% ice damage bonus and a 12% attack increase. This is not as good, obviously, as the 4-piece ice set. However, this is an option that you can use. One reason you may want to use this is because you may have not gotten good stat rolls on a full 4-piece ice set. So you may have to use something like the musketeer set to make up for it, and use like a crit damage body piece from the musketeer set, for example, in order to like make up for all that stuff. The actual stats matter more than the 4-piece bonuses some of the time. It's dependent upon what stats you get, what drops you get, whether a set's better for you or not. Every account is different. However, of course, the 4-piece ice set will be better than this if you can get the right stat rolls. So just be aware this is a pretty good stat roll, or a pretty good set option for you while you are building up another set. And the last 4-piece I want to talk about here, and you have to use the 4-piece, you can't split this setup for it to work because it will only deal quantum damage if you do that. You want this 4-piece damage bonus from the quantum set if you are going to use this quantum set. It is the 4-piece option, the 4-piece bonus. When the wearer deals damage to the target enemy, it ignores 10% defense, so it always has that static 10% defense shred whenever she attacks. If the target enemy has quantum weakness, the wearer additionally ignores 10% defense. So if the enemy is quantum weak, she will be dealing, she'll have 20% defense shred all the time that she attacks if they're quantum weak. So if you pair her with someone like Silverwolf, for example, you get this even more consistently. And just imagine they're weak to quantum and they're weak to ice. If they're weak to quantum and ice at the same time, this set actually is like super high power, super OP. But that does mean that it is more situational, it is more circumstantial whether this has the damage output that you truly want. And don't forget, she has built-in defense shred as part of her kit as well. If you're using this set, you're gonna have an incredibly high amount of defense shred without even needing anybody else to give her that defense shred, like a Pela or a Silverwolf. By the way, Pela and Silverwolf, amazingly good options to pair with Jingliu, but we'll talk about that later. Now, with Rudolent Arena and Solsato, those are the 2 relic options for the planar sets that you have. Let's go ahead and talk about, well, I like Rudolent Arena the best, and I'll explain that in just a moment. I wanted to talk about the potential of Solsato really, really quick, because both are very, very good, but Rudolent Arena tends to be better. Again, we'll explain that in just a moment. Solsato can actually outperform Rudolent Arena, but only under the right conditions. Of course, you're going to have the right stats. It's going to be stat dependent, your relic rolls dependent, but here's the other thing that it is dependent on. The 2-piece Solsato gives the wearer 8% crit rate, so does Rudolent Arena, but the requirement is lower. You only have to have 50% crit rate for Solsato to work, and the wearer's ultimate and follow-up attack damage increase by 15%. So what you can do is, if you can wait till Jingliu is in her enhanced state, and then crack her ultimate during her enhanced state, and you can do this consistently with the weaving in the right timings and whatnot, this Solsato set can outperform Rudolent Arena, but it requires you to be combat aware and to time out things perfectly for it to actually be able to reach those numbers. If you aren't really thinking about it in the middle of battle, you might kind of forget about it, and then this simply won't be as good as Rudolent Arena will be. So my stamp of approval, or like which I think is better, goes to Rudolent Arena in this case because it will be more consistent for most players, and for some players that have the right roles, it will actually just outperform Solsato most of the time anyway, depending on what roles you get. And you won't have to think about it in the middle of battle. You'll just be able to always have this innate bonus all of the time without having restrictions. Because during your enhanced buff state, you are going to get your skill to be able to go off. You don't have to worry about having that available. It's always available. With Solsato, to get the right damage output, you want to have her ultimate available during her enhanced state. So just something to remember there, because sometimes people need that ultimate to get her to her enhanced damage state. So I would consider using Rudolent Arena over Solsato because of that. However, it does have a higher restriction at 70% crit rate. But just think about this. If you build her for that 70% crit rate, you don't need any more crit rate on her anymore at all, right? You can literally build crit damage everything else and not have to worry about crit rate after you get to that threshold. And she has a lot of crit rate built into her kit. So it is much easier to build her with enough crit rate for this for this Rudolent Arena set than pretty much any other character in the game that I'm aware of. So definitely Rudolent Arena, go for that if you can. Now let's talk about some main stats and stuff here. So for the body piece, you're gonna want to do crit damage if you can. You may have to go for crit rate if you're trying to reach a certain threshold. It's understandable. Sometimes there's nothing you can do. Sometimes you don't get lucky enough on rolls. So you might need to use a crit rate body piece to get you to the thresholds that you need. But if you can reach those thresholds without it, then crit damage is what you want for the body itself. I would go for crit damage or crit rate. I wouldn't put attack percent on her because you want her to do her crit damage properly. That's what you really need out of her. And for the feat, I would go for attack percent, because the thing with Jingliu is she has innate like advances forward, so she essentially gets kind of like a speed buff built into her kit already. So you don't need as much speed on her as you would for a lot of other characters. Kind of like with Seela. Seela has built-in speed buffs that accumulate very quickly, and she doesn't need to be built for that much speed because she's just going to give herself a ton of speed with her own advances forward. You have a similar thing going on with Jingliu. She doesn't need quite as much speed as another character, so I would build attack percent boots on Jingliu and use speed substats on Jingliu rather than leaning into a main stat for speed. And with substats, again, go for crit damage everything once you get the crit rate to the percentages that you need. If you're using Solsato, you only need 50%. If you're building Rudolent Arena, you need 70%. And don't forget that she has built-in crit rate attached to her kit, not just in her traces and whatnot. It's built into her actual combat abilities. So sometimes in the middle of combat, she will give herself a crit rate buff. Don't forget about that. Some other characters, for example, could also give you a crit rate buff, such as Fu Xuan. So just remember, you have these other options. You don't always have to have 70% crit rate before you walk into battle. Sometimes you'll get that in the middle of battle, depending on how you have built your teams. So don't forget about that. It does require a little bit more awareness and a little bit more team building and math, but this is how we're talking about optimization here. If you don't want to be fully optimized, it's okay. You can just build 70% crit rate on the character and then not have to think about it. So with the substats for Jingliu, again, that is the substats for Jingliu, I think it's most important to build her for crit damage, crit damage, crit damage. And then you will need some crit rate in order to get her to those thresholds. Once you get to those thresholds, though, you can do crit damage, everything else. So it is a high priority, but not as much as the crit damage, because once you reach the threshold, you're good. Then you're going to want some attack percent. You'll also want some speed and some HP, and I'll explain why in just a moment. Don't forget about defense, because you want her at probably like at least around 1,000 defense, just so that she doesn't get one shot in Memory of Chaos or Swarm Disaster, because they do deal a pretty decent amount of damage in those environments. But like I said earlier, you don't really need to worry about defense as much, because once you get to that threshold, you're good. If you just don't even think about it, you'll probably accidentally have defense stats on your girl, so you probably don't need to worry about it as much. The reason why you need some defense, some HP substats on her is because she is a destruction character at the end of the day. She will be more targeted by enemies, so you don't want to forget about her survivability, but she also gets a damage bonus dependent upon the amount of HP that she drains from your team. The more higher your HP of your team, the more damage output she'll get when she drains the team, so don't forget about that. But again, crit damage, crit rate, attack percent, speed, HP, defense, and then all the other things don't really matter as much. If you get some break effect, cool, but it's not as important as the rest. And then for the planar spheres, you want to have a ice damage main planar sphere. That's pretty obvious. You can use an attack percent if you need as a placeholder. And then for the link rope, you're going to want an attack percent link rope, in my opinion. Some of you, especially if you're building the Sosato set, might want energy regen rope so that you get to her ultimate more often, but I think it's going to be fine, and her output will be probably a little bit higher if you build her for attack percent link rope. She's not quite the same as Dan Heng. There's a lot of similarities between her and Dan Heng, but I think building her for the higher attack stats are better on her. With Dan Heng, you had the option of like building high attack damage stats, or do I build speed and energy regen? There was like two main builds for Dan Heng. I think with Jingliu, the viability of the attack percent version of her is much better than the speed energy regen version of her. So I would build attack percent link rope, in my opinion. Energy regen rope is an option, don't forget about that. It's just going to be more dependent on your account what you might want to do with that. Okay, so let's go over some really good character pairings for Jingliu really quickly, kind of team composition sort of stuff. Let's mention Silverwolf first, because I did mention her earlier. If you do have the 4-piece quantum set on Jingliu, this is just even better, because you can run 2 ice, 2 quantum team, and you could have Silverwolf guarantee either quantum or ice weakness to the enemies, meaning that no matter what, you could potentially get the quantum bonus from the 4-piece set on Jingliu, or ice weakness on the enemies, which Jingliu would also benefit from as well. Silverwolf, mwah, chef's kiss. You didn't need me to tell you any more than that. What an amazing character. She pairs well with just about anybody. Now let's move on to some free-to-play options that are not just free-to-play options. These are also some of the best options you can have. Pela, she can potentially have a 100% uptime on her debuff when you have her built correctly, meaning that every single time Jingliu would attack during her buffed state, the enemies would have defense shred already on them, and Jingliu deals blast damage, hitting 3 enemies at once during that buffed state, so you're going to have a guaranteed increased amount of damage going off on them due to the defense shred. Pela, amazingly good option. She can also freeze enemies just like Jingliu. Now let's move on to another 4-star option that's a really amazing pairing. Ting Yun. Holy crap, Ting Yun getting the stocks once again. Ting Yun will give you a damage bonus through her skill. She'll also give you a damage bonus through her ultimate, and her ultimate will also give Jingliu energy, meaning that that's just damage, and that's also getting Jingliu to her enhanced buff state even quicker. Ting Yun, amazingly good pairing. That's my girl. So let's all go ahead and talk about Fu Xuan real quick. Fu Xuan, yeah, she's harder to get with Jingliu because they just came out back to back, but if you have her, what the heck, what an amazing pairing, because you get not overall damage bonus, but you also get crit value out of Fu Xuan as well. Best sustainer in probably the entire game besides maybe Locha, but because of the damage output that
Fu Xuan can also give your entire team. Fu Xuan, in my opinion, best sustainer, not just for Jingliu, but for pretty much any team composition you could possibly have, unless you need a shielder. Now let's go ahead and mention Bronya briefly, because Bronya is a very good pairing for Jingliu as well. When Jingliu is in the buff state, it would be very optimal to give Jingliu a very, very solid bonus that comes off of Bronya's skill. When she gets into her buff state, you can give priority to Jingliu through Bronya. Very, very good pairing. And because Jingliu is so skill point efficient, especially in her buffed state, that you don't worry about popping skills with Bronya that often, because it just doesn't matter, because Jingliu is so skill point efficient. An amazing pairing as well. And Yangqing, I just wanted to mention, gets damage bonuses from frozen enemies. Jingliu and Yangqing could potentially freeze the enemies, so could Pela. You get the picture. Lots of damage. And we can't forget about good old Blade, because in my opinion, Blade and Jingliu will be the best dual DPS combo you could possibly have in the entire game, because Jingliu will be buffing Blade when she does her team-wide drain through Blade's kit, but if he's wearing the Longevous Disciple set as well, he'll get another damage bonus off of Jingliu's team-wide drain, so he'll get like a double damage multiplier, if I'm understanding that correctly. I think this easily makes their combo the best dual DPS team you could possibly have. I think Fu Xuan's a great option for this as well, because she can give that sustainability, even if you don't pop her ultimate too often to heal the team, because you might want to keep Blade at a certain percentage. She's more safe in certain conditions, because she can use that ultimate whenever it's necessary to heal the team, and because they have such higher HP because they're destruction characters, they are a little bit more safe. She also has that permanent damage reduction from incoming damage for the whole team, and it's even higher when her skill's active. And when her skill's active, she gives overall damage bonus and crit value as well. So easily, I think those are the three best characters you can have on a team once Jingliu arrives. And I believe if you want to fill in that last slot with a support character, which is the obvious choice, you should potentially consider Pela for that last fourth slot, because Pela has potential on a 100% uptime for her defense shred, meaning that when Jingliu and Blade, who both deal blast damage hitting 3 enemies at once most of the time that they attack, they don't have to worry about who they're attacking, and both of them can just go off because every enemy has defense shred. So easily, I think these two will be the two best DPS combo you could possibly have in the game. I unfortunately have run out of time in this video for the light cone section in detail, but like I said earlier, I did go over the light cones yesterday in a separate video, so go check the link below or the description below and click the link there if you want more detail on the light cones. But I'll mention briefly here that her best in slot is her signature light cone, and if you can't use her signature light cone, just go to the Herta shop and get the destruction light cone from there. It is her best option besides her signature light cone, and literally everybody in the game can get their hands on it, and everybody in the game can get it to Super Imposition 5. It's just that easy, fam, okay? So don't think about it any further. If you can't get her signature, On the Fall of an Aeon from the Herta shop is your item. If this video was entertaining or helpful to you in any way, shape, or form, please leave a like and subscribe. And if it wasn't helpful to you, you hate me gut, you think a smell word, please leave a hate thread in the comments so I can tell you how much more Jingliu likes me than she likes you. Because it's a lot. She likes me like way more than you. It's just, I thought I should point that out. Anyways, I'll catch you next time. Peace out.